Picture this. It's the year 2000.
Okay.
You are 23 years old, and you've just inherited a pretty significant sum of money.
Right.
And you decide to take a spontaneous cross-country road trip, completely inspired by the Beat Generation writers.
Oh, wow.
Okay, yeah. So you pack up your Jeep, you grab your kitten, and you just head west.
Sounds like an adventure.
It does. But, well, just 9 days later, your car is found wrecked at the very bottom of a ravine in a remote Washington forest.
Oh, man.
And the scene appears to be completely staged, with absolutely no sign of you anywhere.
That is, yeah, that's chilling.
It really is. In March of 2000, Leah was a 23-year-old college senior living in Durham, North Carolina.
Okay.
Physically, she's described as being 5'6", about 130 pounds, with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes.
Right.
She had this distinct beauty mark above her upper lip and dimples when she smiled. She was a smoker, spoke fluent Spanish, and had actually been a competitive college soccer player.
She really comes across in all these documents as a vibrant, multidimensional young woman.
She does, but that vibrant picture, it's important, but to really understand her sudden departure, we have to look closely at the psychological context.
Yes. The background materials you shared give us a lot of crucial context here.
Yeah, the years immediately preceding 2000 were just marked by unimaginable, cascading tragedies for Leah.
It's heartbreaking.
Mm.
She lost her mother to heart disease in 1996.
Right.
Then, just a few years later in 1999, she lost her father to a chronic respiratory illness.
And right in the middle of navigating that parental loss.
Yeah, in the fall of 1998.
She survived a near-fatal car crash.
A truck pulled right out in front of her vehicle.
And it resulted in a punctured lung and a severely shattered right femur.
Which is a massive injury. Her injuries were so extensive that orthopedic surgeons had to implant a heavy metal rod alongside her femur just to allow the bone to heal.
So she essentially became an orphan in her early 20s, all while recovering from massive physical trauma.
Exactly.
And looking at the timeline, that seems to be the catalyst for the Jack Kerouac connection you pointed out in the sources.
It makes total sense psychologically.
After her father's death, just months before she was supposed to graduate from North Carolina State University, Leah completely changes her life trajectory.
She drops out of school.
Yep.
She starts spending all her time at a local Durham coffee house called Cup O' Joe.
Right.
She's playing guitar, writing poetry, and developing this deep, deep obsession with Jack Kerouac.
Specifically, she's reading his novel, The Dharma Bums.
And I found it really interesting that this specific book features the protagonist seeking enlightenment on Desolation Peak.
Which is located in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State.
Yes. The literary parallel is impossible to ignore here.
The Dharma Bums is this classic American tale of seeking spiritual truth and rebirth through the rugged isolation of the wilderness.
Right.
For someone who had just lost her anchors in the world, her parents, her physical health, the idea of shedding her old life and seeking a rebirth in the exact same mountains Kerouac wrote about.
It would have held a powerful romantic appeal.
Completely.
And she clearly decided to go find that rebirth. Because on March 9, 2000, Leah abruptly leaves Durham.
Without telling anyone. Right. She takes her white 1993 Jeep Cherokee, which had North Carolina plates JVP 28881, her little kitten named Bee, and roughly $3,000 in cash from the inheritance her parents left her.
But she doesn't tell a single friend or family member she's leaving.
Not one. Instead, she leaves a very specific note for her roommate, Nicole.
And the contents of that note, which Leah's older sister Cara and her roommate found, offer a really bizarre window into her mindset at the time.
They really do.
She left behind a bundle of cash meant to cover her portion of the rent and expenses for about a month.
Okay, so she's paying ahead.
Right. But alongside the money, she drew a picture of the Cheshire Cat's grin from Alice in Wonderland.
Which is just, it's strange.
And she wrote a message that read, "I'm not suicidal, I'm the opposite. Remember Jack Kerouac?" And she actually spelled it out phonetically.
I am really struggling to understand that specific phrasing. I'm the opposite.
It's cryptic.
What is your read on leaving something so cryptic instead of just saying, hey, I'm going on a road trip?
Well, leaving the rent money is a strong behavioral indicator that this was a planned, temporary soul-searching trip.
Right. She intended to maintain her living situation.
And eventually return. However, feeling the need to explicitly state she wasn't suicidal suggests she knew her sudden disappearance would cause a panic.
That makes sense.
But the phrasing "I'm the opposite,"
right,
combined with the Cheshire Cat drawing.
A character famous for disappearing and leaving only a disembodied smile behind.
Exactly. It points to someone who is perhaps feeling a bit detached from reality, or at least heavily romanticizing the idea of vanishing into a literary adventure.
And she hits the road immediately after that.
Yes.
And thanks to her sister Kara having power of attorney over Leah's bank accounts from a previous international trip, investigators were able to pull her financial records.
Which is how we get the timeline.
Yeah, you highlighted this 3,000-mile breadcrumb trail in the sources, and it shows Leah driving from North Carolina all the way to Oregon in just a matter of days.
She was absolutely flying across the country.
Mostly just buying gas and fast food along Interstate 40 and Interstate 5.
Just pushing through.
And that rapid transit leads us to the incredibly eerie CCTV footage you flagged.
Right, the security footage from Brooks, Oregon.
It's from a Pilot gas station just past midnight on March 13th.
Okay.
Leah is captured alone on camera wearing a brimmed hat. Physically, she appears to be in good condition.
But her behavior is what stands out.
Yeah, the video shows her repeatedly, almost nervously, peering out through the glass doors into the dark parking lot while she waits for her transaction to finish.
I want you to really put yourself in her shoes in that Oregon gas station. The interpretation of that footage is highly subjective.
How so?
On one hand, any solo female traveler stopping for gas in an unfamiliar town at 1 in the morning is going to be hypervigilant.
Yeah, looking over your shoulder is just basic self-preservation.
Exactly. On the other hand, the frequency of her looking outside has led many on these forums to wonder if she was observing someone specific.
Like, was there a car following her?
Or was someone waiting by her Jeep? It remains a haunting piece of the puzzle because it is the very last time Leah is definitively seen on camera.
Wow. The very last time. So from Oregon, physical evidence places her just a few hours north in Bellingham, Washington.
Which is much closer to the Canadian border.
Right. And this is on the afternoon of that exact same day, March 13th.
They found a ticket stub, right?
Yeah, investigators later found a ticket stub among her belongings for a 2:10 p.m. showing of the movie American Beauty at the Bellis Fair Mall in Bellingham.
And this introduces a highly debated witness encounter from a restaurant inside that mall.
Oh, this part is wild. Police interviewed two men who were sitting on either side of Leah at the restaurant's counter before she went into the movie.
Both men distinctly remembered her because she was chatty, openly discussing Kerouac and her cross-country road trip.
But their accounts of how she left the restaurant diverged in a way that completely fractures the timeline.
One man insists Leah finished her meal and walked out of the restaurant completely alone.
But the other man, who happens to be a mechanic with a military background, told police a totally different story.
Right.
He claims she left with a third man whom she couldn't bury.
And he provided a detailed physical description.
So detailed that police were actually able to have a composite sketch made of this Barry character.
We really have to look at the reliability of eyewitness testimony here, especially in a busy environment like a mall restaurant.
Yeah, malls are chaotic.
No one else on the staff, and certainly not the other man sitting right next to her, corroborated the existence of a third person.
Which is super weird. Why would only one patron see this detailed interaction?
It's a discrepancy that casts a massive shadow over the early days of the investigation. It forced detectives to chase a phantom suspect who may never have even existed.
And the narrative takes a really dark turn 5 days later on March 18, 2000.
The crash site.
Yeah. A couple is jogging along Canyon Creek Road, which you noted in the sources is a very remote, treacherous side route near Mount Baker Highway in Washington.
It's not a road you just accidentally end up on.
Exactly. And they notice articles of clothing deliberately tied to the trees and branches by the side of the road.
Like markers.
When they look over the edge of the embankment, they find Leah's severely crushed white Jeep Cherokee at the bottom of a steep ravine.
And the physical state of that crash site is what elevates this case from a standard missing persons report into a forensic anomaly.
Because of the speed, right?
Right. Washington State Patrol investigators determined the car was traveling nearly 40 miles per hour when it went off the road.
That's fast for a dirt mountain road.
Very fast. And it rolled end over end multiple times down the slope. By all accounts, it was a violent, catastrophic impact.
But what stumps me here is the physics of the crash.
How do you mean?
Well, a car rolling down a ravine at that speed should be a chaotic, bloody scene inside.
Absolutely.
But the Washington State Patrol notes you provided show the complete opposite.
The lack of physical trauma inside the cabin is staggering.
There was no blood anywhere inside the vehicle.
None. And the glass of the windshield was broken, but it was not shattered outward from the inside.
Which is what you'd expect if an unrestrained body hit it during a rollover.
Exactly. Furthermore, the seatbelt showed absolutely no signs of the specific micro-stretching that occurs when the mechanism locks during a high-speed impact.
So they weren't being worn.
Right. The forensic conclusion was undeniable. There was not a human being inside that car when it went over the edge.
It was completely empty.
Yes.
And the aftermath around the car is just as bizarre. Investigators found her passport, her checkbook, her guitar, CDs, a cat carrier, and scattered cat food in the surrounding woods.
But no Leah and no kitten.
Adding to the strangeness, blankets and pillows were found hung inside the broken windows of the Jeep.
Which strongly suggests that someone used the wrecked car as a makeshift shelter after the crash occurred.
But the two biggest items left behind are what really challenge the leading theories here.
The cash in the ring.
Yes. They found $2,500 in cash tucked into a pair of Leah's pants left inside the car.
Just sitting there.
And even more surprisingly, they found her late mother's diamond engagement ring.
Which her friends explicitly stated was her most prized sacred possession.
Hidden carefully under a floor mat.
While foul play or an intentional disappearance are tempting theories to jump to, we have to look at the psychology of the scene.
Let's break that down.
Leaving $2,500 in cash behind essentially destroys the theory of a highway robbery.
A thief simply doesn't leave thousands of dollars behind.
Right. And it also severely undermines the theory that Leah intentionally vanished to start a brand new life under the radar.
You don't finance a new secret life by abandoning your entire nest egg.
Or your most deeply sentimental item in a wrecked car in the freezing woods.
It makes no sense. But looking at the timeline you provided, there's a frustrating gap after this discovery. Things seem to go completely dark for 6 years.
Because of the Everett sighting.
Yeah, the Everett sighting you highlighted seems to have really muddied the waters and created a massive distraction for law enforcement.
It pulled them entirely in the wrong direction.
A few days after the car was found, a man called the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, claiming his wife saw a disoriented woman matching Leah's description wandering around a Texaco gas station in Everett, Washington.
Which is pretty far south of Bellingham.
Right. But before police could get detailed contact info, the caller panicked and hung up.
Yet, police spent significant resources treating the tip as credible.
Which explains why the physical evidence of the Jeep itself was essentially ignored, just left to sit rotting in a police impound lot while detectives chased sightings across the state.
It's a classic investigative misstep. The most significant twist in the physical evidence didn't happen until a new set of detectives took over the cold case in 2006.
When they finally popped the hood of the impounded Jeep,
Yes.
they found that the starter relay wire had been cut and tampered with.
This is a huge detail.
The Straight Dope forum thread you shared gets incredibly technical about this. I'm hoping you can translate some of the mechanical jargon they were debating.
I can try. Think of the starter relay like the car's nervous system.
Okay.
By cutting and tampering with it in a specific way, someone essentially bypassed the brain of the ignition switch.
Oh, wow.
This alteration would allow the car's engine to turn over and accelerate continuously without anyone sitting in the driver's seat pressing the gas pedal.
So it was ghostwriting.
Essentially. The mechanics on the forums debated the exact torque required to push a heavy Jeep up a muddy incline, but the consensus confirms the forensic evidence.
The crash didn't happen by accident.
Exactly. It was deliberately staged by someone with specific working knowledge of automotive electrical systems.
And going back to the restaurant in Bellingham, the only person who claimed to see the mysterious Barry was a mechanic with a military background.
The investigators certainly noticed that connection too.
I bet.
This tampering discovery prompted them to scour the vehicle for microscopic evidence again.
And they found something, right?
They did. They managed to isolate male DNA on an article of Leah's clothing, and they lifted a distinct fingerprint from under the hood of the Jeep.
So they tracked down the mechanic from the restaurant.
Who had since moved to Canada, but they compelled him to provide samples.
But his fingerprints didn't match the one found under the hood.
They did not.
As for the DNA results, the police never publicly released them, which is incredibly frustrating.
It really is. It leaves us with a mountain of contradictory clues and a handful of very distinct theories heavily debated by the Reddit and web sleuths communities.
Let's get into those theories. Looking at the Reddit thread, the most prominent theory revolves around mental health, specifically a severe manic episode.
Yes, the psychiatric theory suggests Leo is experiencing a sudden onset of mania or even psychosis.
Potentially triggered by the profound compounding trauma of losing both parents in quick succession.
Surviving a near-fatal crash and suddenly having access to thousands of dollars in inheritance is a perfect storm.
Reddit users in the forums, some of whom shared their own clinical experiences with bipolar 1 disorder, pointed out how her behavior aligns with a manic break.
The sudden sleepless cross-country drive.
The cryptic, grandiose note about the Cheshire Cat and Kerouac.
Oversharing her life story to complete strangers in a mall restaurant.
Right. This theory proposes she drove the car out to Canyon Creek Road in a highly altered state.
Perhaps staged the crash herself in a moment of delusion to mimic a literary disappearance.
And tragically wandered into the wilderness where she succumbed to the freezing temperatures.
From a behavioral standpoint, it is a tragically plausible scenario.
Yeah.
When someone is in the grip of a severe manic episode, their logic doesn't follow standard rational rules.
So staging the car to look like a camp?
Hiding the ring under the mat, leaving the money?
Mm-hmm.
It might have made perfect, cohesive sense to her in that specific moment.
That is so sad to think about.
However, we have to consider the physical evidence. A manic episode doesn't neatly explain the presence of male DNA on her clothing.
Or the mechanical sophistication required to hotwire a starter relay to ghost ride a vehicle off a cliff.
Exactly. Which brings us to the alternative theory. Foul play.
Right. The foul play theory posits that someone else tampered with her car.
Someone else deliberately staged the accident to hide a crime.
And someone else left that male DNA behind.
Did she meet someone dangerous on her Kerouac-inspired journey who realized she was a vulnerable, wealthy woman traveling alone and took advantage of her?
The foul play theory relies on a third party who wanted to make her disappearance look like a bizarre accident.
Or who simply wanted to dispose of her vehicle far away from wherever a crime actually took place.
But again, a killer trying to hide their tracks doesn't usually set up a cozy shelter with blankets in the windows or leave thousands of dollars in cash behind.
It just doesn't fit standard criminal behavior.
I know you were particularly interested in the NAMUS database anomaly, and it really is the most shocking detail from the web sleuths forums you provided.
It gave me chills reading through the sources.
In 2014, 14 years after Leah vanished, a mummified body was discovered in Whatcom County.
The exact same county where her wrecked Jeep was found.
The initial details entered into NAMUS, which is the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, described the remains as a male, about 5'5", aged somewhere between 33 and 55.
But the internet sleuths caught something massive.
Yeah, they did. The body had a metal rod surgically implanted in the right femur.
And forum users somehow got a hold of the medical documentation.
They discovered that the lock code on that specific medical rod, the manufacturer's serial batch number,
Traced back to the exact same batch of rods shipped out and used in the fall of 1998.
that is the exact same time window Leah had her reconstructive surgery after her car crash in North Carolina.
This is where we really have to look at statistical probability.
Okay, lay it out for us.
As a medical professional pointed out on the Reddit thread you shared, severe femur fractures requiring this specific type of metal rod are relatively uncommon in young people. Finding a body with that exact rare surgical hardware in the exact same remote county where Leah went missing.
Featuring a rod from the exact same shipping batch.
The mathematical odds against that being a coincidence are just staggering.
But the official database classified the body as male. How does that happen if it's Leah?
This requires an understanding of forensic anthropology and the realities of decomposition.
Okay.
In the Pacific Northwest, exposed remains deteriorate rapidly due to weather and animal scavenging.
That makes sense.
Historically, there have been numerous cases where highly decomposed or mummified remains have been misgendered by anthropologists during initial examinations.
Really?
Yes. Determining biological sex relies heavily on the intact structure of the pelvic girdle and specific cranial features.
And if those are gone?
If those bones are degraded, missing, or shattered, anthropology becomes a game of probabilities, not certainties.
Wow. But when the forum users tried to push law enforcement on this incredible lead and ask for DNA testing, they noticed the NAMUS page for this John Doe had just been quietly deleted from the internet.
Which is highly unusual. When a profile is permanently removed from NAMUS, it typically means a positive identification has been made and the case is closed by authorities.
So what do the forums think happened?
Some users speculated that perhaps the family of this doe privately identified the body as a male relative and requested the medical details not be made public.
Oh, I see.
But because Whatcom County law enforcement has never officially released a statement clarifying that this doe is definitively not Leah Roberts, it leaves this lingering, haunting possibility wide open for the internet community.
We have to leave it to you, looking at all these sources, to weigh whether this was an impossible one-in-a-million medical coincidence or a bureaucratic mistake masking the final resting place of Leah Roberts.
It's a tough call to make without the official DNA confirmation.
When you step back and look at the entirety of the timeline you've brought us today, the emotional core of this deep dive is so clear.
It really is.
Leah Roberts was a young woman who had been through absolute hell, losing her family and her health, and she was just trying to find herself again.
She sought out literature, travel, the open road, something so many of us have felt the desperate urge to do when we feel lost.
But her search ended in a riddle that has kept her frozen in time for over a quarter of a century.
And as we wrap up our analysis of your sources, I want you to think closely about the specific symbol Leah chose to leave behind for her roommate before she drove away.
The Cheshire Cat.
The Cheshire Cat. If you read Alice in Wonderland, you know the Cheshire Cat uses confusing philosophical language to completely disorient Alice.
Right.
And then it slowly vanishes into thin air until absolutely nothing is left but its disembodied smile.
Just the smile.
I want you to ponder this. Look at the staging of the car on Canyon Creek Road. The blankets hung carefully in the broken windows. The sentimental engagement ring hidden under the mat.
The thousands of dollars in cash left behind.
The expertly cut starter wire. Did whoever orchestrated this scene, whether it was a stranger who harmed Leah or Leah herself in a highly altered state of mind, intentionally create a physical Cheshire Cat smile?
Oh, wow.
Were all of these contradictory, baffling clues deliberately manufactured to keep investigators endlessly spinning in circles?
Because if they were, it worked.
It ensured that the ultimate truth of what actually happened to Leah Roberts would permanently vanish into the Washington woods.
That is a deeply unsettling thought that is going to stick with me for a long time.
It's a case that doesn't let you go easily.
Thank you so much to you, our listener, for bringing these incredibly detailed sources to the table and letting us explore this wilderness mystery with you today.
It's a heavy, complex puzzle, but an important story to keep alive.
That's all for today's deep dive. We will catch you next time.